few of the symptoms of potential privatization, which I believe we can stop. And what are the big lies about government finances that stand around education? And what are the big lies about population projections? And how can we get communities to unite to protect public education? This is what really originally got me involved in politics, was to try to stop the sell-off of public school lands across BC. And it's my contention that the school land sales were driving the school closures, not the other way around. And I still think they are. This government has liquidated so many assets for cash so that they can create the illusion of a balanced budget. And nowhere has this been more evident than it is in public education. We have closed 200 schools in British Columbia since this government came in, and at least 79 have been sold off. Deep cuts to the capital budgets are placing a strain on the entire K-12 system, and it's kind of the hidden part of the deep cuts. People are aware when operations funding gets cut because there's less services for special needs kids and a lot of things like, I don't know, something crazy like having the library open during lunch hour for the kids. These things go by the wayside. But the cuts to capital funding are much more concealed. The motives are the same though. They are to undermine our confidence, I believe, in public education and what it has to offer us. So let's mentally separate two things that the government will constantly try to get you to mush together in your brain. Let's separate government finances and the economy for each other. Because what this government will tell you is if you make a comment about government finances, about education, they'll say, oh, well, the economy, you know how it is, the economy. And if you make a comment about the economy, they'll say, yes, but you know it's going to take us a longer time than that to balance the books. They play these two things off about each other, and they also use the words interchangeably. And if you tease those two things apart in your mind, you start to have a much clearer idea of what's going on with funding for public services. So the first symptom of the move to privatize, or even if we don't want to accept that there is a move to privatize, let's just say the first symptom of a lack of commitment to public education. That is a fair thing to say. The first symptom always seems to be lies about money and numbers, big lies. So lie number one, either the economy was booming from 2001 to 2006 and we didn't need cuts to public education or tax cuts, or the economy was tanking and we did. But you can't have it both ways. This government told us nothing, and it was true, but that from 2001 until 2006, our economy was booming. But at the same time, they were telling us about these dire cuts to public ed. The biggest cuts to public education were made during one of the biggest economic booms that this province has ever experienced. When the Liberals first came in, they cut $350 million out of the operations budget right away. Then they cut the capital budget in half from $450 million to $225 million. It's down to $220 million now, and that's 13 years later, almost. Most of you will recall the huge layoffs of special needs staff and librarians, teacher librarians around 2002-03. They cut taxes during a boom when there was no need for economic stimulation, even if that worked. We know now that tax cuts only cause a very brief blip in the economy, maybe 2 or 3 weeks and it's done. A couple of months at the most. We know that. So even if it worked, why would you have cut taxes in a boom when apparently business was quite happy to invest in British Columbia? But oh no, let's slash them. Lie number 2. The myth of declining enrollment as a justification for cuts and closing schools. Between 2001 and 2007, we had a temporary dip in enrollment of just under 7%. So on a school with 300 kids, you lost 21 of them. And yet entire schools were closed sometimes the only elementary school in a town, which is a death knell for a town. I got letters from people across British Columbia saying, if we lose our elementary school, people will leave the town. They won't stay here. I got letters from people saying that their kids were busing an hour and a half in the snow each way to go to school. The myth of declining enrollment became a self-fulfilling prophecy in those towns where the schools were closed. And I kept asking myself, I kept thinking, because I love demographics. I'm really interested in demographics. And I kept thinking, but the echo boomers are going to turn 30 any second. So I started making speeches to school boards and say things like, look me in the eye and tell me that people are going to stop having sex. And they'd all laugh. But they didn't believe it. They didn't understand the demographics. We, the baby boom, and I'm the very tail end of it, had babies. And then they grew up. And lo and behold, they started turning 30 with a vengeance around 2000, and they've been doing it ever since. And your perception when you look out the window that there's babies everywhere is accurate. There are babies everywhere. There are. And this is a good thing. We love babies. We love kids. We love the wheel of life. We love hope for our future. We love all of those things. What's not to like about babies? Nothing. I love babies. So why were people telling us about declining enrollment? Never in the history of public ed in BC before, when we had a temporary dip. It's all cyclic, right? When big blips in the population come, those things are repeated. Never in the history had they sold land off before. Never. So I started to think, when they started selling schools, oh my God, the school land sales are actually driving the closures, not the other way around. And I became convinced about this the more that I looked into it. So what was happening was, at the provincial level, just to wax serious for a moment, capital funding was being run on a 10-year time horizon, which is absurd. Capital funding should obviously, as generational cycles go, be operating on a 30-year time horizon. Then stupid-ass decisions like selling schools wouldn't happen so easily. They just wouldn't. So through the network that I built when I was working to save school lands, I finally had my suspicions confirmed. I was introduced to a gentleman named Warren Monroe. Warren was fired from Statistics BC for refusing to falsify population projections. They told him that he had to split Surrey in half because it was growing too fast. And Surrey was one of the big ones that tipped me off, because they were going to sell 2 schools in Surrey. They did sell them. I never was successful in getting a network going there to stop the sale of those 2 schools. They're the ones that got away. I'm driving through Surrey, and all I see is billboards that say, fastest growing community in Canada. And yet they're selling 2 schools? So the other thing that was happening was that Ministry of Education was publishing, and still is publishing, only 10 years out in their statistics. When I discussed this with Warren, he said, no, we can with great confidence. You know how they say plus or minus 3%, 19 times out of 20? He told me about the confidence and the validity and all of the different reliability, all the different factors that go into making statistics valid or reliable. 2005 was the highest birth rate in Canada in 15 years, and it just went up from there. We know what happened when all-day kindergarten is started in 2010, which was when the 2005 kids hit us. It was the same year as all-day kindergarten. And everybody went, oh my God, what a mess. We have no space for these kids. What's going on? It was partly all-day kindergarten, but it was a lot that the echo boomers started coming to school in a wave. And they haven't stopped since. So those schools that were closed, there are children across this province now who will spend their entire elementary school in a portable because of that. A few years back, the entire facilities grant budget was spent on portables because of space shortages. $140 million. So it'd be nice to say, wow, this is just really bad planning Who knew? Who saw those echo boomers coming? Because the kids are here and we owe them an education. And we owe them a neighborhood school. In the US, big box schools, in the places that have worked to privatize, big box schools are easier to contract out because they're more profitable. So the corporations are more interested in bidding on them, right? It's just volume and profit. Kids are widgets. And you can see the pattern of behavior unfolding here, almost the exact identical behavior unfolding here that we've seen in places like Oakland and Virginia. The emphasis on testing, the big box schools, the cuts to special needs, all of these things are the things that went along with this pattern to privatization. There used to be this legislation that if a district decided to sell a school, they got 25% of the money, and central government got 75%. So there was a disincentive to sell schools because you only got 25%. And that's the way it should be. It's a big, monstrous decision to take a school out of a neighborhood. It's big. What happened was the government came to the school district and said, if you want money for capital funding for a new school or a new roof on a big school, you gotta bring money to the table. And there's no money ferry. So the school districts were being forced to sell the land to qualify for capital funding. That's what was going on. Debt-free BC was another thing, that was the justification for everything, or as my husband calls it, the mustification. Our debt has gone up $3 billion since May 15th. So I don't know who's smoking what opium about debt-free. And the other thing that goes along with that is that when you contract out a school, when you do anything in a public-private partnership, what governments are doing is concealing debt. They're saying, hey, I want you to borrow this money for me so no one will know I'm in debt, okay? And then I'll build you a school, or you build a school, and I'll pay you back, and I'll pay the interest you pay, and I'll pay you a profit, okay? But then no one will know I've got more debt. It's a way of hiding debt. The sad, sad thing is that government borrows money at 0 to 1% right now, and corporations borrow money at around 6 or 7%. So we're being indentured even worse when you put the differential in the interest rate and add it to the differential in profit, motive, and all of the rest of it. It's too bad, because it would have cost us less to just bite the bullet and borrow the money ourselves. It's really too bad. So those are some of the things that are going on. It's nuts. And I guess the thing that I'd like to, I keep trying to inform people about this because I think that public education is a perfect idea. I think it's a perfect idea. We never execute it perfectly, but it's a perfect idea. It's an idea that has brought so much good and empowerment to our society. And so I had much more to say, but of course I've run out of time, and I thank you all very much for your kind attention.